All right, so, when you think about Maine, you probably think about peaceful coastal towns.
Yeah, absolutely. Like quaint villages,
Exactly. And, the things that go with those.
lighthouses, and,
Yeah.
the crash of the
The
waves.
smell of the ocean.
Definitely. And like that sense of security and peace.
Absolutely.
But then Cape Elizabeth, between 2005 and 2006,
Yeah.
residents experienced something that really shook that sense of peace and security. This is the story of the Cape Intruder, and we are diving deep into this strange case today.
You know what really grabs you right away with this story is how it's so different from what we usually think of as like criminal behavior.
Yeah.
It wasn't about like stealing things or violence, and there were no reports of violence and no obvious reason for it other than just breaking in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's this lack of like normal criminal intent that makes it so creepy, right?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, go on.
We're talking about someone going into people's homes in the middle of the night, not to steal anything, but just to watch them sleep.
Yeah. It's that violation of privacy, that feeling of being watched when you're most vulnerable, that's just so unsettling.
Totally agree.
And the fact that this person was never found, never caught.
Yeah.
And their reasons are still a complete mystery.
Yeah, it's so creepy.
It's really left this lasting feeling of unease in the community.
When we think about why certain crimes really stick with us, it's often because we can kind of understand the motivation,
Right.
even if we don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Like needing money, revenge, a crime of passion, But here we don't have that basic understanding,
Right.
and that's exactly what makes it so confusing and disturbing.
Right.
It challenges what we think we know about how people act.
And Cape Elizabeth at that time and even now is the kind of place where people feel safe.
Right.
The crime rate is low.
Uh-huh.
There are even accounts of people leaving their doors unlocked.
Wow.
That's how much trust and security they had.
Yeah.
Which makes the actions of the Cape Intruder feel even more like a betrayal,
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So let's go back to the beginning, August 2005, the first reported encounter.
Okay, so the first report talks about someone waking up in the middle of the night
Yeah.
and finding a stranger just standing there at the foot of their bed watching them.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine waking up to that?
No.
That sudden shock of seeing someone you don't know in your own room,
Yeah.
maybe with just a little bit of moonlight shining in. It's like something out of a nightmare.
Totally.
And the way the intruder reacted is so interesting.
Oh, yeah.
The moment the person in the bed moved, he ran away.
Yeah.
He didn't try to talk or threaten or anything. He just left quickly.
It's so strange.
And the police reports say there were no signs of forced entry.
So they just walked in?
It seems like a door was probably left unlocked.
Okay.
And nothing was taken.
Wow.
So first you can see why they might have thought it was just a weird one-time thing.
Yeah.
This brings up an interesting point, though, about how the police deal with things that are out of the ordinary.
Oh, yeah.
When there's no clear evidence of a crime like theft, damage, or assault,
Right.
it can be tough for them to figure out how to handle it.
Yeah, for sure.
But then these break-ins started happening again and again.
Right. And that's when the real alarm bells started going off. Right.
Exactly. By December 2005, there were more and more reports of similar incidents.
Uh-huh.
And what's really creepy is how similar all the reports are.
Right.
Again, it seems like the intruder got in through unlocked doors.
Yeah.
No violence.
Yeah.
No physical contact from the intruder.
Uh-huh.
And they never took anything.
Wow.
And every time the person in the house woke up or made a sound, the intruder would just vanish.
It's like he was a ghost or something.
All these matching details make it pretty likely that it was the same person doing all of this.
Right.
And the fact that there's no clear reason for it other than just watching people,
Yeah.
that suggests some kind of deep-seated psychological thing going on.
Right.
Some kind of compulsion.
The only description witnesses could give was pretty vague, though. A young man, maybe in his early to mid-20s, that doesn't give you much to go on, does it?
No, not really.
So you can imagine how the mood in Cape Elizabeth changed as these break-ins kept happening.
Oh, yeah.
That feeling of safety just disappeared.
Yeah.
And people were left with this constant fear.
Yeah.
Like they were vulnerable even in their own homes.
This really shows how much these break-ins affected people's minds.
Yeah.
Even though there was no physical violence,
Right.
our homes are supposed to be our safe spaces.
Yeah.
Where we have privacy and security. Having that boundary violated even silently can really mess with your sense of security.
Yeah.
It's no wonder people started locking their doors and getting security systems.
Right.
Those are natural reactions when you feel like your safety has been taken away.
Then we get to February 2006, which seems like it was the climax of this whole thing,
Yeah.
but also when it suddenly stopped. The reports say there were a bunch of break-ins that month, all with that same creepy pattern. At this point, the police were taking it really seriously.
Right, yeah, for sure.
They increased patrols in the areas where the break-ins were happening.
Right.
And they put out a sketch of the suspect based on what little information they had from witnesses. A thin, light-skinned man in his 20s with short hair.
That sketch, even though it wasn't perfect, was a crucial tool for getting information from the community.
Right.
The fact that they got two separate tips, both naming the same person, suggests that maybe there was someone people already thought was suspicious.
That's interesting.
You know, maybe someone whose behavior or just the way they looked had already made people uneasy.
But here's where things get really frustrating.
What happened?
The police looked into those leads, but they couldn't find any solid proof connecting that person to the break-ins.
Really?
No arrests were ever made.
Wow, so they had a suspect, but no evidence.
It seems that way, and then just as suddenly as it started, it stopped.
What do you mean?
After February 2006, the break-ins ended completely.
Wow, just like that.
No more sightings, no new reports.
Huh.
It's like the Cape Intruder just disappeared.
So strange, this sudden end to the break-ins is another piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Did something happen to the guy?
Right.
Did he move away?
Yeah.
Or maybe he got some help, you know, like therapy or something.
That's possible.
We're left with a lot of possibilities, but unfortunately no real answers.
And this brings us to the biggest question of all, doesn't it?
Yeah, the why.
Why?
What could possibly be the motivation behind these creepy and confusing acts?
Exactly. The sources we looked at have a few theories that have been considered over the years.
Okay.
And it's pretty fascinating to think about each one.
Yeah, let's hear them.
The first one, as you mentioned, is that maybe this was a local voyeur or a peeping Tom whose behavior just escalated over time.
Okay.
And they started actually going into homes.
I see.
That seems like a reasonable place to start.
Yeah, voyeurism is a range of behaviors.
Uh-huh.
And for some people, the thrill they get from watching others might fade over time.
Okay.
And they might need to get more directly involved to feel that same thrill.
I see.
Even if it's still passive, like just silently watching someone in their private space.
Right.
All the police activity, the attention this was getting in Cape Elizabeth,
Yeah.
could have been enough to scare someone like that off.
Okay.
Making them think it was too risky to keep going.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what's interesting about voyeuristic behavior escalating like this
Yeah.
is how the power dynamic changes.
What do you mean?
It goes from passively watching to actively invading someone's space, which might mean the person needs to feel more in control.
Right.
Or the lines between what's okay and what's not are getting blurred in their mind.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
Then there's the theory that the intruder was maybe just visiting the area.
Like a tourist?
Yeah, or someone who was only living there temporarily.
Okay.
The fact that the break-ins seem to happen around certain times of year,
Like what?
August, then a break until December, then February, could fit with someone's travel plans, you know?
Yeah.
Like someone visiting family or working a seasonal job.
Right, that's a good point. And it could also explain why the break-in stopped so suddenly.
Yeah.
If the person was only in Cape Elizabeth for a short time, them leaving would naturally mean the end of the incidents.
Right.
But this theory doesn't really tell us why they were doing this in the first place.
That's true.
Why break into homes this way?
Yeah.
What need were they trying to fulfill?
That's the big question.
The third theory, and maybe the most disturbing one, is that the Cape Intruder might have been stalking specific people.
Wow.
The idea that someone might have been secretly watching their victims before actually going into their homes at night is terrifying.
It is.
And it raises serious questions about what their intentions were.
Right.
If that's what was happening, then why were only those people targeted?
Yeah, and why didn't it escalate into something more?
Right, like actual contact or even violence.
That's a good point.
Maybe for this person, just breaking in and watching was enough. Maybe that's all they needed to satisfy some kind of internal urge or fantasy.
That's really creepy.
Yeah, it is chilling thought.
Then there's the possibility that this person had some kind of mental health problem.
Okay.
And that these break-ins were driven by a compulsion.
I see.
This theory suggests that maybe they got some kind of treatment later on, which could explain why the break-ins stopped so abruptly.
This theory fits with how unusual and seemingly pointless the crimes were.
Right.
When someone has a compulsion, it's often because they have these intrusive thoughts and urges, and they feel like they have to act on them.
Right.
Even if it doesn't make sense logically.
Yeah.
The act itself might be the only way they can get temporary relief from anxiety or distress.
I see.
So if this person then decided to get help,
Yeah.
or maybe was forced to get help,
Right.
it could be why they stopped breaking into homes.
And then there's the most frightening possibility, the one that you can't help but think about even after considering all the others.
What's that?
Could the Cape Intruder have been something much worse?
Worse how?
Like a serial offender in the making?
Oh, wow.
The thought that he might have been testing the limits, seeing what he could get away with, maybe practicing, or even working his way up to committing more serious crimes somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's a terrifying idea, even though we don't have proof that he actually did anything like that.
While there's nothing in the Cape Elizabeth incidents themselves that definitely supports that theory.
Right.
It's something we have to consider when we look at the bigger picture of how criminals behave.
Yeah.
A lot of people who commit really bad crimes start with things that seem less harmful.
Uh-huh.
So just because he stopped in Cape Elizabeth
Right.
and didn't do anything worse there doesn't mean he couldn't have moved on to something more serious in another place later on.
That's a scary thought.
It is.
All of these possibilities lead us back to the same thing, don't they?
The unanswered questions.
Yeah, the reports really emphasize how much the people of Cape Elizabeth never got closure, even though no one was physically hurt.
Right.
The mental and emotional impact of knowing that someone was watching you in your own home can be really hard to deal with.
Absolutely.
It can affect a whole community sense of safety for a long time.
That violation of privacy, that feeling of being watched when you're so vulnerable,
Yeah.
it can leave a deep scar, and not knowing why it happened
Right.
makes the anxiety even worse.
Yeah.
It makes it harder for people to understand what happened and move on.
It leaves you with this lingering feeling of unease.
Exactly, like you're always looking over your shoulder.
And the reports say that the story of the Cape Intruder has become kind of a local legend in Cape Elizabeth. A haunting memory for the people who lived through it.
It's a stark reminder that even in the most peaceful and close-knit places, weird and unexplainable things can happen. And it can completely shatter that sense of safety and security that people often take for granted.
So to sum it all up, we've taken this deep dive into the unsettling mystery of the Cape Intruder.
Yeah.
The repeated silent break-ins into people's homes. The fact that we don't know for sure who did it or why they did it.
Right.
And all the unsettling theories that have been proposed to try and make sense of it all.
It's a case that really sticks with you.
It does.
Because it's so different from the usual true crime stories we hear.
Yeah, what's really striking about this case is what's missing.
You mean like clues?
Yeah, in most crimes, we look for the person who did it, their motive, and ultimately some kind of resolution.
Right, like an arrest or a conviction.
Yeah, but with the Cape Intruder mystery, we don't have any of that. And that's exactly what makes it so disturbing and why it keeps drawing us in.
It shows how uncomfortable we get when we're faced with the unknown and unexplainable.
Yeah.
Especially when it makes us feel unsafe in our own homes.
It really gets you thinking, doesn't it?
It does.
Out of all the theories we've talked about today, which one do you find most believable?
That's a tough one.
Yeah. Or maybe after hearing all this, you have some other explanations that haven't even been mentioned.
I don't know. I'd have to think about it more.
Yeah, it's a real head-scratcher.
It is.
The silent watcher of Cape Elizabeth is still a mystery. A chilling reminder that even the most peaceful lives can be disrupted by the unseen and the unexplained.
Yeah, and it leaves us with this lasting feeling of unease.
Absolutely.
Like anything is possible.
Yeah, anything.